All right, today we are diving headfirst into one of the oldest and, let's be honest, one of the most emotionally charged questions in all of philosophy. This is a big one. And here it is. This is the question at the absolute heart of the debate. I mean, you look around the world, you see earthquakes, disease, cruelty, and you just have to ask, if there's a perfect God out there, how can any of this be happening? So to really wrap our heads around this, we first need to see how philosophers take this really personal, painful question and turn it into a cold, hard, logical argument. It's known as the logical problem of evil. Okay, let's walk through this, because on the surface, it looks pretty airtight. Step 1 just lays out the standard definition of God, right? All-powerful, all-knowing, all good. Step 2, well, that seems like a no-brainer. A good, powerful being would want to get rid of evil. Step 3 is just a fact. I mean, turn on the news. Evil exists. So the conclusion seems to follow automatically. The God from step 1 just can't exist. And you can see why this argument has been so convincing for so many people. It's not just saying that God is unlikely, it's saying that the existence of God and the existence of evil are a flat-out logical contradiction. You can't have both. For a lot of folks, that's a huge intellectual roadblock. But of course, the story doesn't end there, not by a long shot. Philosophers and theologians have come up with some really powerful responses. These are often called theodicies, which is just a fancy word for an argument trying to justify God in the face of all this evil. And they don't deny that evil is real. Instead, they go right after a key assumption in the argument we just saw. And this, right here, is the pivot. This is the whole game. The defense says, hang on a second, what about step 2? The idea that a good God would just wipe out all evil. What if that's too simple? What if, and this is the big what if, allowing some evil is actually necessary for a much greater good? So the first move in this defense is to redefine what evil even is. The idea going way back is that evil isn't a thing that God made, like he made mountains or puppies. Instead, evil is a lack of something. It's a corruption of good. Think about it like this. Darkness isn't a thing, right? It's just the absence of light. Well, in this view, evil is the absence of good. God creates goodness. Evil is just what happens when that goodness is twisted or missing. Now, to really build their case, defenders of this view split evil into 2 big categories. You've got moral evil, that's all the terrible stuff that people choose to do, and then you have physical or natural evil, that's suffering from things like hurricanes and cancer. A solid defense has to have an answer for both. Okay, let's start with moral evil. The classic response here is the free will defense, and it goes like this. What God wants more than anything is a world full of creatures who can truly, genuinely love. But, and this is the key, real love has to be a choice. You can't program a robot to love you and call it genuine. That's not love, it's just a script. So the core idea is that when God gave us free will, he took a massive risk. He knew we could use that freedom to choose incredible things, love, heroism, compassion. But he also knew we could choose the opposite, hate, cruelty, and selfishness. And the argument is that a world with that real, high-stakes choice is infinitely more meaningful than a perfect little toy world populated by mindless puppets. But that just handles the evil people do. What about natural evil? What about a tsunami? This is where the soul-making idea comes in. The argument here is that suffering, as awful as it is, can be like a furnace that forges character. I mean, think about it. How do you learn courage if there's never any danger? How do you develop deep compassion if you never see anyone else hurting? In this view, hardship is basically the gym for the soul. This brings us to a really humble idea called skeptical theism. It tackles those gut-wrenching cases of suffering that just seem completely pointless. And it basically says, look, we should be really skeptical about our own ability to understand God's master plan. Our perspective is just so limited. It's like a little kid screaming because they have to get a shot. They can't see the bigger picture, that this short-term pain prevents a much worse disease down the road. Maybe, just maybe, we're like that kid when we look at the universe. So, up to this point, we've been on the defense, right? Showing why evil might not be a deal breaker for belief in God. But now, the argument is about to do a complete 180. I know, this sounds crazy at first, but what if the whole problem of evil actually contains the seed of its own answer? What if our ability to even recognize something as evil is a giant clue pointing directly towards God, not away from him? Let's break this down. It's called the argument for morality. Step 1. When you say something is genuinely, objectively evil, not just something you dislike, but truly wrong, you're actually appealing to a higher standard of good, a way things ought to be. Step 2. That standard, that moral law, can't just be your opinion or my opinion. For it to mean anything, it has to be real and objective, something beyond all of us. And step 3. Where would a transcendent, objective moral law come from? Well, the argument concludes it has to come from a transcendent moral lawgiver, the ultimate source and standard of goodness itself. And here's the knockout punch of this argument. In a universe that's just matter and energy, with no God, there's no real ought. There's only is. So the very concept of objective evil kind of melts away. It just becomes a matter of personal taste or social convention. To be truly outraged by evil, this argument says, is to unknowingly borrow from a worldview where a standard of good actually exists. And, this moral argument doesn't just stand on its own. It's part of a bigger cumulative case for God, backed up by other heavy hitters, like the argument that the universe must have had a first cause, or the mind-blowing fine-tuning of the laws of physics that make life even possible. The point is, when you see all the positive evidence for God, the problem of evil starts to look less like a contradiction and more like a deep, profound mystery we have yet to solve. So after all that, where are we? We've seen the powerful logical attack, and we've explored the really deep, multi-layered defense. At the end of the day, the goal of these defenses isn't to make the pain of suffering just magically disappear. It's not about giving a neat, tidy answer for every horrible thing that happens. The real goal is to show that God and evil can coexist without it being a logical contradiction. The whole thing shifts from being a problem you solve on a whiteboard to a deep and, painful mystery that you have to live with and think about. And that leaves us with one final huge thought. If God does exist, if this universe isn't just some cosmic accident, then all the suffering we see and experience isn't just meaningless static. It's part of a much bigger story, one that is ultimately heading towards a good conclusion. And the question then isn't if there's a reason for it all, but what on earth could that reason be? And maybe more importantly, how does wrestling with that question change how we face the suffering in our own lives?